for February the 24th to order. Welcome, everybody. It's starting to warm up a little bit. Hopefully this isn't a false prelude to an early spring. If we could get everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a prayer from Pastor Eric from Crossroads Church of Westfield.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you, and let us pray. Tonight, God, we want to take this moment to thank you for this gathering and to pray for your greatest wisdom upon these who are called to lead this city of Westfield. God, we are well aware that other municipalities in our state struggle for their own existence. And with them, we also share the responsibility of the cooperation to better our state. But we thank you very much, God, for the work that you are doing in our city because of the challenges and issues that arise for us because of growth and for plans for life ahead in this community. With goodness and growth, God, comes responsibility, and we thank you for the responsibility and the freedom that you give to these leaders to care for and oversee the decisions for the goodness and welfare of all of the people in this city. And so tonight, God, as we gather, we pray for those who serve us in various ways. From those who diligently care for our streets in this difficult and challenging weather, for those first responders who are always available to us, to those who administratively oversee the work of those departmental heads, clerk treasurer, the city councilors, and Mayor Willis. We thank you for the gift of their lives and for the gifts that you have uniquely given to each of them that you are using to make Westfield a place for all people. And so tonight, God, we pray that you would help them to acknowledge the strengths that each of them brings uniquely to the table, that they may constantly know that together they are of much greater value to us than they are any part of them alone. And so, God, we are blessed by you that we live in a city where churches and civic groups and business communities, school system, Chamber of Commerce, Westfield Public Works, the employees of the city, and other leaders and servants and volunteers in this community actively work together to better the quality of life, that none may be forgotten, and that all may be affirmed. God, you are so good, and today, this night, we give you great thanks. And I pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Eric. Well said. President Tam, would you like to run the meeting, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Also, just before we begin, I greatly appreciate all our faith leaders, particularly the pastor this evening, starting all our meetings that way. It does mean a lot to all, quite a few of us. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Can we note the presence of a quorum?
Victor McCarty?
Here.
Patrick Tam?
Here.
Kurt Waniger?
Here.
John Dart?
Here.
Joe Deppner?
Here.
Noah Herring?
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we all, I assume everyone's had the opportunity to read and review the minutes from the previous meeting. We need a motion and a second.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilor McCarty, seconded by Councilor Dart. Any further discussion? Seeing none, may we call the roll?
John Dart?
Yes.
Joe Deppner?
Yes.
Noah Herring?
Yes.
Victor McCarty?
Yes.
Patrick Tam?
Yes.
Kurt Waniger?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Well, we're just learning new rules. That's all good tonight.
Been a while.
Yeah, been a while. You're all good. The next order of business is the approval of claims this evening. I'm assuming everyone's had the opportunity to review those. Is there any questions? We need a motion and a second.
Make a motion to approve the claims from February 24th, 2025. Second.
We have a motion made by Councilor Waniger, seconded by Councilor Dart. Seeing no other discussion, may we call the roll?
Joe Deppner?
Yes.
Noah Herring,
Yes.
John Dart,
Yes.
Victor McCarty,
Yes.
Kurt Wanniger,
Yes.
Patrick Tam.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. We do not have any changes to the agenda this evening. Director Todd, do we have any residents that wish to address the council this evening? Seeing none. The first order of business, we do have a council appointment to the Westfield Police Department Merit Commission. We are appointing resident Tyler Berger. He is currently a general counsel for the Indiana Department of Homeland Security and also teaches at the IU McKinney Law School at this time as well. Do we have any discussion? I think we technically need to take a vote publicly on this as well.
Make a motion to appoint Tyler Berger to the police board.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilor Wanniger, seconded by Councilor McCarty. Seeing no other discussion, may we call the roll?
Noah Herring,
Yes.
John Dart,
Yes.
Joe Deppner,
Yes.
Kurt Wanniger,
Yes.
Patrick Tam,
Yes.
Victor McCarty.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. This evening with us is our fantastic group. The mayor has a proclamation and a presentation this evening.
There we go. So this young lady here to my left has been a wonderful servant in our community last year or so, specifically with the Disability Council, but it goes way beyond that. Not to mention her husband is a firefighter in this fine city, and she has spent, I'm sure, many sleepless nights worrying about him. And not only is he a firefighter in Westfield, he can't get enough of it, and he also volunteers for the town of Sheridan. So this family serves and gives back to our community in ways that most of us will never quite appreciate. When I was on council, a lot of you probably know, we tried to get a disability council codified. We were not successful, but from that sprouted the Mayor's Council on Disabilities. And Nicole agreed to come on board and take the reins and leading this group about a year and a half ago, has done some amazing things for people with disabilities in our community. And I'm just super excited about the trajectory of the group, the accomplishments we're getting done, and the impacts that we're making. So I wanted to go ahead and read this proclamation. Whereas the city of Westfield recognizes people of all abilities to be an important and valuable part of our rich diversity, and whereas the city of Westfield also recognizes the distinct talents and experience those with disabilities offer to our community, and whereas the city of Westfield reaffirms its commitment to creating environments, policies, and systems that welcome and support all community members, including those who live with disabilities. And whereas we must acknowledge as a community that there are systematic barriers that preclude those with disabilities from enjoying equitable experiences and living independent lives within the community. And whereas dismantling these barriers to create equitable, inclusive environments for all is a responsibility everyone shares. And whereas each Westfield resident should do their part to, one, recognize the valued experiences and contributions those with disabilities add to our community. Two, understand the barriers and the financial, economic, spiritual, and community losses we experience when systematic barriers prevent contributions from those with disabilities. Three, find solutions to include everyone in all aspects of our community. And four, encourage the development of equitable policies and systems for everyone. Now, therefore, I, Scott Willis, Mayor of the City of Westfield, do hereby proclaim March 2025 as Disability Awareness Month in the City of Westfield, Indiana, and urge all community members and policymakers to continue pushing forward for a more inclusive and equitable city. In witness whereof, I, Scott Willis, have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the Great Seal of the City of Westfield, Indiana, on this 24th day of February.
I am Nicole Sutherland, and I am the chair of our Westfield Mayor's Council on Disabilities. There we go. So the purpose for the council, we represent the needs and interests of people with disabilities in the city of Westfield and provide a platform for disability community to express challenges, issues they're facing in Westfield, establish priorities and implement strategies to address the various challenges and needs facing people with disabilities within Westfield, provide informed input on the development and assessment of future city projects and services that impact people with disabilities, and collaborate and partner with local organizations, businesses, and disability stakeholders to build bridges, establish partnerships, and increase opportunities for people with disabilities. The following are just a list of some of the current participating council representatives, and then some of the community partners that we are currently working with. Some of the accomplishments so far: we have updated branding and the website. We've relaunched the Westfield Mayor's Council social media accounts. We've had the inaugural Sensory Skate Night at Westfield Ice Ribbon. That was December 17th, and we had approximately 50 attendees. We launched our workforce development program on January 18th, and we currently have 4 businesses that are participating: West Fork Whiskey, Carter's Play Place, Goodwill of Central Indiana, and Culver's. We also launched our community art exhibition program on January 24th. And then we are participating at Westfield Welcome Events by providing a more sensory-friendly experience. And then today with the proclamation for Disability Awareness Month in March. So what's to come? We are currently working on some adaptive programming. This could be book clubs, workout classes, art classes, game nights, and more. We're going to have our inaugural Westfield Sensory Day on March 1st at Westfield Washington Public Library, and that's going to kick off our Disability Awareness Month. We are going to have Accessible Creek Stop experience June through July. We're going to have the addition of sensory-friendly elements at Westfield Welcome Events. Our workforce development panel discussion will be held in August. And then October is Disability Employment Awareness Month, and we do also plan on having a job fair in October. And then our Sensory Fall Fest at Freedom Trail Park in October, and accessible and sensory-friendly skating at the Westfield Ice Ribbon. And I'm going to ask Bridget to come up.
Hi, I'm Bridget Lucan, and I'm Nicole's emotional support person. I just want to talk to you just a little bit about what it would look like if there was an ordinance to make this a codified advisory council. First of all, it would simply change the name from Mayor's Council on Disability to Advisory Council on Disability. But it would really formalize the Disability Council and give it a voice to make a more substantial impact. It would address the needs of those with disabilities within the city and ensure this doesn't disappear if the administration changes. It will strengthen the community involvement by having a focused platform where community stakeholder voices can be heard and challenges can be addressed. It'll provide more resources to implement effective change in the community on a larger scale and allow for a longer runway than the political election cycles to tackle some of the difficult problems that will take years to address. With an advisory council, we would have 1 council chairperson appointed by the mayor, 3 appointees from the community by the mayor, 2 appointees from the community by the city council, and 2 appointees from the community by Westfield Washington Schools, and then the Westfield ADA coordinator, and then there will be non-voting advisors from several departments as well. All appointees must be living with a disability, provide care for someone with a disability, or be employed by a company that provides services to those with disabilities so we don't get too far from our mission. The community impact that we're hoping to have is on infrastructure, workforce development, community engagement, accessibility, public safety, economic development. As you can see, there's a whole list, but the main focus is really just attracting and retaining new residents to the city. Before we get to questions, I just want to give a short impact statement as to why this is important. I'm a 25-year resident of Westfield. I moved here in 2000 to raise my family in a small town. Best laid plans. So even in the best of circumstances, I'm sure many of you are aware that parenting might be the toughest job in the world, but it did become infinitely more challenging for me when not one, not two, but 3 of my children were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. In addition, my middle son was also diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and cerebral palsy. Thankfully, we were enrolled in an award-winning school system with incredible services. The school supported not only my children, but our whole family as we began to navigate the world of disability. My kids were able to learn, make friends, become involved in their school community, and develop that Westfield Shamrock pride. But adorable children with disabilities grow into adults with disabilities. Adults who still have that Westfield Shamrock pride, but have a much more difficult time becoming involved in their community, a community that is happy to welcome them, but doesn't always know how. That's why the Westfield Mayor's Council on Disabilities is so important. The council can help create that bridge to make Westfield a truly welcome place for people of all abilities, a place where they can live independently, engage in competitive employment, and be included in community events. When everyone has a place at the table, we all benefit. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Councilor Woniger.
I don't have any questions, but I really appreciate what this Disability Awareness Council does in our community, what you guys have done already, and look forward to what you accomplish here in the near future.
Thank you.
What are some of the initiatives you're focused on in workforce development?
I'm so glad you asked.
Okay.
So those 3 little kids that became adults are all working in the community. All of them are working in healthcare. The goal is to help create those bridges and to help educate our businesses to show them that the accommodations that they need to make usually don't cost very much and usually aren't as difficult as people think they are at the outset. And so it's really just creating information for our businesses, and then also training our workforce, partnering with Invest Hamilton County on some of their initiatives as well.
So is your organization doing the training, or is it on-the-job training, or is there, you mentioned Hamilton County, so is there?
So Invest Hamilton County does have training. We also can partner with vocational rehabilitation that has job coaches that go into the work sites as well. So there's plenty of training out there. It's really just making those connections.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Are you familiar with the Arc of Indiana Erskine Green Institute?
Yes, my son's a graduate.
Thought so with healthcare. So they also do that for hotels. It's a pretty successful program in the hospitality industry as well as in the healthcare industry. Kim Dotson, mayor, runs Arc of Indiana. Former Westfield resident. She downsized but lives in Carmel now. But we'll talk about that later with Kim. We could all gang up on her. But runs a great program. But it's something that particularly with the hospitality and tourism piece growing, particularly with the hotel sector, and then also healthcare, as you personally know, those are frankly great careers for a lot of meaningful jobs and a lot of opportunity. But that would be something that personally I would be more interested in helping, making sure you guys are connected there, because we could easily accommodate something like that in Westfield.
That's wonderful. That's also one of Invest Hamilton County's initiatives. They do have training programs at hotels. So it's really just finding the people to fill them and then making those connections.
Absolutely.
Just real quick, I've had family members with disabilities. I worked in the special ed department at the high school. So needless to say, I have been outspoken ever since 2022 when this should have passed and was established. So I'm looking forward to just getting this done. Again, should have been done a long time ago, and just how we're able to take it, run with it, expand it, as our neighbors, Fishers, Carmel, have already done. So this will be a wonderful program for us to do.
Awesome. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, Victor, we are the only city in Hamilton County that doesn't have this codified. I think we're doing a fairly successful job of running it through a mayor's council. Well, the problem is there's a political piece to that, and every 4 years, you're not sure you're going to have a mayor that supports the council moving forward. So as you look at some of these big problems that take years to develop, for example, workforce development, we have the best training program in the world, but they can't drive, which many people with disabilities can't. How do you get them to the job? So figuring out transportation is not a short answer. I mean, Janice is trying to address that, but there's limitations with that. These are things we're trying to go down a path like Carmel and Fishers has already, but we need a bit more teeth behind it and a bit more long-term, a longer runway to pull this off. So I think what you're going to see happen here in the next month or two is Nicole and her team will be reaching out to you all to introduce what this means and let you guys chew on it. We're not going to push you to make a decision, in the next few weeks or months. We're going to let this percolate and grow with you guys, and we want to make sure we don't strike out again when this does come back for a vote. So just understand that this is going to start becoming something they're going to be pushing for, and we're here to answer any questions you guys have as you try to digest it and get your arms around it.
Hey, thank you very much. The next order of business that we have this evening is the downtown plan presentation with Christine Pearson from Browning Day.
Just going to do a brief intro here.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So as you may know, we've been contracted with Browning Day since October of 2024. Since then, they've been working diligently on the downtown plan and its redevelopment and what that scope looks like. So we have Christine Pearson here tonight, as well as Paul Wolf, one of her counterparts. So they'll be going over some of the updates of the plan tonight.
Hello, I'm Christine. So excited to be here. Hi there. We'll see. Does that work better? All right. I have a booming voice. I'm Christine Pearson with Browning Day, as Caleb said. Thanks for having us here to talk about the update. If you can go to the next slide. We have a simple agenda to talk about and to walk you through. I'll be speaking to the review of Phase 1 study, and Paul will be talking to you about the challenges and what this matrix means. So this slide has a lot of words to absorb, and I get that. But what this does is identify what we promised we would do with the development of the master plan for downtown, and that is the left-hand side of the page. What we said we would do is broken down into 3 phases. We first said we would go through a discovery and organizational phase, which is what I'm going to talk to you about, followed by a visualization and ideation phase. That's where the juicy design plan visualizations come through. And then finally, to wrap it up and create a comprehensive package and present and share out the story. What you see on the right-hand side of the page is what the final deliverable will look like. And I want to point out that in a lot of these studies, master plan documents, the first thing you see is the site analysis and the discovery pieces. But we've decided to intentionally organize the master plan first in that deliverable because everyone skips to the back to see the master plan. So that's why what we're doing today with the discovery and organization is actually the 3rd chapter in the final deliverable that you'll be getting in a few months. So as we think about the discovery and organization, what does that mean, really? I mean, that means that we are observing with site visits, coming to Westfield and different times of day. We are learning the wants and needs of people that we've met with, including the police department and the historical society and members of the community and the mayor and others. So we're doing a lot of listening. And then we're gathering insights from all of the data and the observations that we've made. And that's what I'd like to really talk about next, is what are some of those insights that we've discovered? And so if you could flip to the next page. So this first one is a comparative analysis between downtown, and this is in plan view. So Westfield, the plan of Westfield is in the upper right-hand corner. And there are 6 communities that we've identified that are similar to yours in size, or some other attribute we felt important. And so you can see that Westfield enjoys a very large swath of green, and the other communities, which are Fishers, Carmel, Nashville, Indiana, Naperville, Illinois, Noblesville, and Zionsville, do not have that differentiating green swath. We think it's important to compare what the scale of this community is compared to your neighbors in other cities, because otherwise it's hard to grasp how big a downtown are we thinking about here. So the red, 3 takeaways from this one: the green and the presence of the red boxes. The red is the commercial retail component, where goods and services are sold and people enjoy dining and retail. You'll see that downtown Westfield has a lack of this type of activity, whereas all of these other similar communities have quite a bit of it. And also interspersed between those commercial retail is parking. And we know parking is very, very important, or else it wouldn't be in all these other communities. It's important to support the retail and the commercial activity and the livelihood of the downtown. So this is a look to compare. We don't want to be any of these communities. We're not advocating for that. We're simply looking at what exists today and what other communities of similar size and scope are enjoying. This next one that we've gathered some insights on, there's 4 plans here and thumbnail views. The first one is the Westfield Historic District. So Westfield enjoys a National Register Historic District, and that's in the hashed area. There are other either notable or contributing or listed historic register elements there. So we've mapped them out to see where the concentration of them are. This is simply an inventory of information that exists with the National Register. Connectivity is the next map. If you were to zoom in there, you would see that we've mapped all of the sidewalks, making note of where there are gaps in the sidewalks, where the golf carts can safely run today, which are on streets less than 25 miles per hour, and any gaps we have with those, that connectivity. We also have noted points of conflict where the vehicles and pedestrian could clash for safety reasons and so forth. The third one is the street and intersection performance. It's basically saying how safe, what is the, not safe, how is the traffic flowing around the town? And this picture will change with development over time, so it's important to benchmark it in a graphic way so we can come back and test what will happen to the traffic and the flow when development comes along. And finally, the downtown defined. Now, we have in yellow what we call the downtown core, and it's a draft preliminary, it's basically saying this is where the core area of the downtown, but there's also a downtown adjacent, and that's in the salmon colored dash line. So we're trying to hone in on the center of the downtown area and recognizing that this may be it. It may change as we develop the plan. But this is, to us, what it looks like the downtown core would look like. The next series of insightful diagrams include existing land uses, where we're mapping institutional, commercial, residential, and all of the other land uses. The floodplain map is on your upper right-hand corner. The yellow shapes are parcels that are impacted by floodway or floodplain. Commercial activity is defined by places where you have food and beverage, and we've turned on the parks so that you can see that a lot of the activity naturally is gravitated toward those green spaces. And finally, the existing zoning as it exists today. And again, some of these documents will change, and they change sometimes weekly. And we're updating these documents so that we always have a current record of all of the zoning and land uses that are occurring today. And move back. And next, I have Paul to talk about the challenges.
You got a sneak preview there. Paul Wolf, I'm a design architect and urban designer at Browning Day. And I wanted, so Christine talked to you a little bit about the kind of studies we've been doing. So all of these diagrams are as we're analyzing the existing state of downtown and some of the things that are coming along that we know about and are working with the city on. And so through all of those analyses, we've been able to generate a series of challenges. So these are challenges that we've noticed as we've done these studies, that these are the things that we're going to have to address in the plan itself. So I'll walk you through those 8 of them, and they're sort of high-level concepts. And essentially, they're the connecting thread, right, through all of these diagrams that show different pieces of information. So the first challenge we're calling center of gravity. So right now, there was a previous master plan that was done for the southwest quadrant. Some pieces and parts of that are being built even today. You know, we see it across the street. So naturally, there's a sort of gravity of motion, of development, of impact that's happening in that southwest quadrant. But as we're looking at the whole downtown, and our task is to the northeast, that naturally sort of needs to move up to what we would call a center of gravity. And you can kind of see this the diagrams we're showing are overlaid on the map of the city, and they're just graphic. But the idea is how do we drag that kind of activity to a more central location? And is that centered around Union and 32, or is it centered a little bit further to the east? We're not sure yet. So how do we incentivize development, and what are the right kinds of development in order to bring that center of activity towards a more central location? Challenge number 2 is about here and there connections. So in urban planning, there's a concept we talk about, the here and the there. And if you are here and you want to get to there, how do you do it? Is it obvious? Is there a visual connection? Is there a physical connection, a pedestrian way? Or if you're in a car, do you know how to drive to that place you want to go? Or walk, or drive your golf cart, whatever that might be. And so as we look at the state of the downtown currently, there's missing connections in that. I think the kind of one that comes to mind all the time is Grand Junction Park to Asa Bales Park. There's not a real good connection between those currently. And we've kind of mapped out here some other ones. So the big diamonds are referencing sort of big connection points. We just talked about the center of activity being in the southwest quadrant of the city right now. So how do you connect up? How do you connect pedestrians, vehicles, people safely, and encourage them to move about a downtown core? And so some of those nodes are along those areas, right? We also have, as 32 gets developed in the future, gets upgraded, pedestrian movement across that street, north to south. What does that look like, and what's a safe way of doing that, and making sure pedestrians are safe? So as we think about that, as we think about the plan for downtown, we're looking at those missing connections between here and there and kind of trying to knit those together. Third challenge, we're talking about welcome to Westfield identity. So we've got a sign as you drive into Westfield that says, welcome Westfield, City of Westfield, right? But what does that mean when you get to downtown? And where is that point, right? As you're arriving to downtown via car, via golf cart, via bike, walking along the trails, what is the moment that you arrive in downtown, and how do you know that? Is that some kind of iconic architectural style? Is it about the open spaces and the greenery? Is it about signage or a story that the downtown is telling? And how do we make sure that that's equal and obvious to everybody that arrives to downtown? One of the things that I've been sort of talking about in this moment is we think to the future in the golf tournament, right? We're not going to have this done by then. But if the next one, we have a visitor who's never been here before, and they go experience some golf, and then they come downtown for dinner. How do they know for sure that they're in a town? How do they have that identity, right, of a downtown core? And so what does that feel like? So that's the kind of challenge here as we look at the welcome to Westfield. Challenge 4 is really boring. It's called districts or blends, and it's really about how do we program our land use in this downtown core, and do we look at very specific interventions in our land use and our zoning targets, or do we go with broader brush strokes to achieve our end goals? And so ultimately there may be a mix of those two things as we go through the design process, but how are we really integrating commercial, the missing red blocks that Christine mentioned. How do we integrating different types of housing, different types of zones within the downtown network? And again, these are just diagrams. Don't read too much into the blocks there. And how do we knit that historic core, right, the existing historic piece that we have and the buildings that we're standing in one of them, how do we knit that into a downtown story as well and make sure we're being respectful of that as we develop future plans for development? Another one, and you heard Christine mention it also, that you have an asset here in this city that no other comparable city does. The green network of parks and open space is a big asset. So how do you capitalize on that investment, right? It's a differentiator, and how do we lean into it? So all the interventions in terms of development potential, about planning, zoning, all the things we do need to look towards those green spaces, need to knit those green spaces together, make sure they're accessible, connected, maybe embrace them a little bit more than they are currently in some different ways. So we'll be looking at that as we sort of think about the green spaces and organizing the downtown around those spaces. And that includes the creek, some things we haven't quite embraced fully yet, right, as a downtown. So how do you kind of differentiate that as you move forward? Challenge number 6, and we're almost there, we got 8. Challenge number 6, walkable communities. So you see a lot of P's on there, parking garages, parking strategies, right? As we think about what makes a successful downtown, it's the ability to go there easily and make sure and want to go there, right? If it's hard for me to park, maybe I don't need to go to that restaurant for dinner, right? Maybe I'll just go with something easier. So how do we make a cohesive parking strategy that is in the right spots, that encourages people to park and walk and embrace the downtown? All these other things we talked about, right? They sort of weave together. So if you have a here and there connection that you've made, now all of a sudden, if it's easy to park and you have an easy way to move about the downtown, you're starting to build a nice experience for someone coming or visiting downtown or who lives there, right? So where do those strategies go? And again, don't read too much into where those locations are. This is simply a diagram. But where are those parking interventions and how do they connect into the fabric of downtown? And some of those are coming. We know that. Union Square across the street has a garage in it. So how do we build into that as well and make sure we have a cohesive parking strategy for all of downtown, not just the Northeast, but the whole thing? Challenge 7 is about place attachment. So you see the nice little diagram of the Westfield heart there. But we want a downtown to feel like a home. A word that kept coming up in our listening with various stakeholder groups and with the city and with the mayor was about having a hometown, right? Westfield is people's hometown. So how do you embrace that? How do you make the downtown feel like someone's hometown? Again, we talk about, is it existing historic elements and how are you weaving those into the story of the history of Westfield? And maybe that's about an experiential thing or places or markers or something. Is there that unique story or that embracing of a past and a future that really makes people feel like this is their home and they're in the same way that they do now, right? And the last point on there is, does it wow its own residents and visitors, right? Does downtown make you go, wow, I'm proud to live here, I like this place? So that's place attachment, which is a little bit qualitative, a little nebulous. And the last challenge is downtown living. So if the previous challenge was about how do you feel, this is about the physical nature of living in downtown. Are we providing a beautiful architectural and open space character in our spaces, right? Are about design standards and about quality of building and tree canopy and connections and pedestrian spaces. Are those beautiful and do they encourage people to really want to live there? And is there a sufficient density and diversity of housing products, right? It's kind of a simple problem, but are there places that people want to buy or rent and live, right? And are there enough different kinds of those that we feel confident that more and more people will come and want to live in downtown? So that's downtown living. So there's 8 challenges there. And again, these are through threads, so we've pulled each of these from all this analysis work that we've done. And now, and this seems overwhelming, but we've taken those challenges, and this is getting into our work currently. We've taken those challenges and we've turned them into our design criteria. So if those are the challenges that downtown is facing and that the downtown plan is facing, this is how we're designing to address those. So we've taken those 8 challenges and we've turned them into our criteria. So as we design, we're going, and you see the kind of columns on the right that are labeled sketch 1, 2, 3. Those are just examples. But we're going to evaluate each of the designs that we develop in-house against those 8 criteria and rank them. And as we rank them, we're sort of understanding which concepts are better, which concepts are yielding better results than others. And this is not one person doing a ranking, it's across our office and the staff that's working on this. So we're getting different perspectives, different viewpoints as we're iterating through different design processes. The other thing I want to point out real quick is that on the left column, there's a weight factor. And so 5 in one column is not equal to a 5 in another column because certain things are more important. And we've gone through a whole process, so you're seeing the weight factor on the left, and it's not in numerical order there. But they're in the order that I just presented them in. But we're going to re-rank them. And so we've worked with the city, we are working with the city on that, to re-rank those in the correct order. And what's most important to, and you're seeing it there, what's most important to everybody and what's kind of lower down on the list. So I'll just highlight the top 2. So the lowest importance that we have, the number 1 there, least important, is the districts or blends. That's kind of a zoning problem. It is important to how we structure a downtown, but it's not necessarily the most important thing. So that ends up at the bottom of the list. Whereas walkable communities rose to the top through that ranking process. And so having a cohesive parking strategy and a interconnected downtown that's walkable and supports pedestrian movement was the highest ranked thing. So you can see how those rank there. And as we go through this design process, this is how we're going to analyze things. We have a lot of qualitative information, and how do you kind of put a quantitative spin on that? And this should blend those 2 things pretty nicely so that we have great ideas we're coming up with, and then making sure we're being true to the challenges that we found through our analysis process. So that one idea, even though it's cool, doesn't necessarily rise to the top. It has to meet all of the criteria of our challenges. And then lastly, I'll just talk about the next steps. So as we go through those next 2 phases that Christine mentioned at the very beginning, our design and visualization phase, and then telling the story, this is how we're going to do some of those things. And these are just reference examples of images, but we're working on developing a kit of parts. So these are place types, and you may have heard about that from the comprehensive plan team as well. So we are working with the comprehensive plan team to make sure that our language dovetails with their language, and that it's one story that we're telling about Westfield as a whole, and then how we knit that into the downtown. So there's a kit of those parts that we're developing, and those could be like open spaces or streetscapes, things like that. And then as we work through the design iterations, we like to visualize things in kind of 3 dimensions, and I think that helps everybody understand it. You can look at a plan all day long with a box that says mixed use or multifamily on it, but unless you see the fact that it has restaurants along the bottom floor, you kind of don't understand that. So seeing things in 3 dimensions, getting kind of visualizations of that, and so that's how we're going to iterate through our design process as we move forward. That's it. That's the wrap up for phase 1. So we'll open up to questions at this time.
Hey, thank you very much. Do we have any questions this evening for Ms. Pearson or Mr. Wolf? You actually rendered people speechless. This is, I'd like to get some tidbits from you.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
I need to talk to you after the meeting. Maybe you can teach me something. So appreciate that. In terms of the different challenges, so forth, how do you address State Road 32?
Do you want to start that, or you want me to take that?
Go for it while I think.
Okay. Difficult.
There's a lot of answers to that one.
Yeah. It's certainly a difficult challenge. You know, when we showed those diagrams of the other cities, there was that we kept that central axis on there, and it turned sideways in other places. Yeah, if you want to zoom back there. Yeah, perfect. You can see the black line is sort of that orienting axis of the different towns, but nobody has that same level of traffic density. I think you could argue Fishers with 116th is similar in traffic volume, and they have a similar challenge, and they've solved it by drilling a trail underneath the road, right? And that's a pretty big intervention. So as we think about how 32 develops, we lean into a little bit of the existing infrastructure. So there are curb cuts, there are pedestrian crossings that are going in there. There are some open-ended questions about the safety of those. You know, NDOT has done their work, but they're not going to be signaled, right, in the way that we know we can do. So there's some questions about safety and questions about golf cart movement. Certain things we've been looking at about shifting axes of travel away from Union or to Union. Do you push everybody into the middle? I don't have solutions for you right now. I would be real clear about that. But do you move everybody to the middle, or do you move everybody kind of one way or the other, depending on how you develop things? The other potential solution is elevating over the road. That's a big capital investment and requires public-private partnerships probably with parcels or city acquisition. So there's challenges to that as well. But certainly it's something that we recognize as the primary challenge of the downtown is dealing with the road, with 32, yeah. You have some thoughts there as well?
It's definitely a divider, and we totally recognize that. And Paul's been talking about stitching, how do we stitch on either side of it, you know, for safe crossings and so forth. Paul's been talking about that. But it's also an opportunity, right? It's 32 adjacent. What happens next to it? The development plans that we're iterating next will leverage what's great about 32. You've got a great streetscape plan on the books. So the development around it can leverage that and utilize that investment in that public space for a very rich downtown experience. So it has functional problems, but I guess I'm suggesting it's not all bad.
There's opportunity.
So it's opportunity, right? And I think you'll see the opportunity and what that looks like when you see different plan iterations around that. You'll look back at 32 and like each one has a different, could potentially have a different feeling. You'll feel differently about 32 depending on what the rest of the adjacent plan builds out to look like. Does that speak to your question?
I just see it exactly how, frankly, both of you have kind of described it. It's an opportunity, but it's also a great challenge, how we do that. To get somebody to cross State Road 32 safely on foot is, in my opinion, not going to be at grade in any way, shape, or form. And I just would challenge anyone to go to Denny's and tell them to cross the street with a stroller and two little kids and let me know if they're going to do that. The answer is no. So that's the piece that, how do we make some of those changes? Fisher's Tunnel is pretty creative, particularly how they had participation to pay for it and some other things from a design perspective. But we have a couple different nodes that you pointed out in terms of where people hopefully will want to cross, and parking, structured parking and those types of pieces as well. So just some different opportunities, different challenges, but yet I do think it's opportunity though too. So.
And I'll say, if you go down the road of a larger intervention, you know, similar to a Fisher's Tunnel, not saying do a tunnel.
Sure.
An intervention of that scale, it has to be in the right spot.
Yep.
Because if it's a little bit too far that way,
Not going
you're
to be
not going
used.
to do it. You're
Yeah.
not going to walk.
Not going to be
over
used.
and use that thing. So it has to be very, very connected and very critically placed, I think. So it's
Absolutely.
a very important study as we work through that.
Any other comments, questions this evening? We look forward to continuing working with you. We appreciate all the fine work you're doing, and thankfully we have smarter minds addressing some of these opportunities for us as well. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
This evening, we're going to start with old business ordinance 2508, which is the Grand Park District DORA. This evening, we have Danielle Carey-Tolan, our deputy mayor, making a presentation. A reminder to councilors, this is old business, so it's eligible for adoption this evening.
Yes, good evening, council members. For the record, Danielle Carey-Tolan. Before you is the Grand Park District DORA. This is very similar to the one that you guys adopted earlier this year, actually late last year, sorry. They're all blending together right now for the downtown Westfield DORA district. The map, is this it? As we talked about, is just the Grand Park district and Grand Park itself. Oh, you want me to turn it? You'll turn it. There you go. We got it. Is there any questions? I know we discussed several items previously, but this is the same rules, including the operation times that was stated in the previous ordinance that you guys adopted. This is just currently just an establishment over Graham Park. And once we get for other establishments, we'll be adopting those into the resolution as well.
So currently, are patrons allowed to walk around Graham Park in certain areas with alcohol right now, outside of the event center?
Currently, yes.
Okay.
Are they?
In the baseball area, soccer area?
Yes.
What fields?
They're not supposed to.
They're not supposed to.
That's why we're establishing this, so that way we can do it legally.
If it becomes an issue, that we find like sportsmanship or parents and stuff like that, are there repercussions to taking this away in the future with the GPSE contract? So if we give this and then we take it away, are there financial repercussions on us possible?
Not on us, no, because we're establishing this to help the district, right, and help the future amenities that are going to be there that we're creating in the Graham Park District along that corridor. So it's just not just Graham Park that's going to be part of this. It's to help incubate the economic development through this area.
And we have no commitments with GPSC Outdoor District. That was never discussed. It's not in the contract.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, if this thing gets voted down, there's no ramifications at all.
Yeah, Counselor Herron, on behalf of somebody that does not like alcohol at youth sports personally, I think your question's right. I will tell you, as a dad that's been out there, Bullpen's been very restrictive historically on this. Frankly, you also see a lot of our Westfield Police Department, they used to have a college summer league, and they tried to promote a little beer sales, if you will. In the evening, they did get some sales. I never saw anything, but they took pretty significant precautions. They have zero interest turning into a YouTube news sensation. There's been some pretty horrendous things in youth sports with alcohol. Parents behaving even worse than normal at youth sporting events. So it's something that I share your thought, but I think it's really for the Graham Park Master Plan and those southern parcels, if you will, running out of the event center. But there is some free movement right now. When they do it, they don't do this every weekend. I mean, it's not something they do consistently. It's just not really part of their business plan, at least not at this time, at least from what I've seen.
Correct.
But I'm with you on that. So, yeah. Any other questions this evening? This is up for final consideration this evening. We need a motion and a second.
Motion to approve ordinance 25-08.
Second.
We have a motion made by Counselor McCarty, seconded by Counselor Dart. Seeing no other discussion, may we call the roll?
Patrick Tam,
Yes.
John Dart,
Yes.
Joe Deppner,
Yes.
Noah Herron,
Yes.
Victor McCarty,
Yes.
and Kurt Woniger.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Ordinance 25-10 this evening is our next order of business, which is the Common Council of the City of Westfield, Indiana, creating a new fund, number 251 for communications. Danielle Carey-Tolan, our Deputy Mayor again.
Yes. Good evening again. For the record, Danielle Carey-Tolan. Again, this was before you for introduction at the last council meeting. This is a non-reverting fund for communications department. These are specifically securing and making sure that these funds are secured for the communications department for like the Memorial Day event, the weekend, Mayor's Disability Council, and just any other further events, and maybe even the future Mayor's Youth Council.
Any discussion this evening? Seeing none, we need a motion and a second.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 2510 for the creation of Fund 251 for communications.
Second.
A motion made by Counselor Woniger, a second by Counselor McCarty. Seeing no other discussion, may we call the roll?
Noah Herron,
Yes.
John Dart,
Yes.
Joe Deppner,
Yes.
Kurt Woniger,
Yes.
Patrick Tam,
Yes.
Victor McCarty.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
We're moving on to new business this evening. Both are resolutions I'd like to point out, which mean they're eligible for adoption this evening. Resolution 25-106, which is the Common Council of the City of Westfield, Indiana, approving and authorizing, one, the execution of lease agreements relating to the financing of a new police station headquarters and a new fire station. Second, the pledge of certain general revenues of the city to the Redevelopment Commission in connection therewith, and repealing all resolutions inconsistent therewith. Sounds like a lawyer wrote that.
Possibly they did.
Yeah, possibly. And I believe we do have a lawyer present this evening, Mr. Otten.
Yes, for the record, again, Danielle Carey-Tolan, and I'm just introducing Dennis Otten with Bose here to talk you guys through and answer any questions about this.
Thanks, Danielle, and good evening, council members and mayor and others. Dennis Otten with Bose McKinney and Evans. We've been working with the city now on this exciting project. Actually, it's two projects. It's the new police station headquarters project and the new fire station number 85 project. This is part of a financing approval that we've been working on. Legally, this financing needs to be approved the way we've structured it through the Redevelopment Authority and the Redevelopment Commission, and I'll explain in a second on why we're using that as an avenue for a financing vehicle here. There's several options with this type of financing we can use, and we think that's the most efficient one for the city and makes most sense. The Redevelopment Authority and Redevelopment Commission met last week, held a public hearing, and approved their forms of financing documents and lease agreements, which are similar to what you have before you this evening, which is a resolution that approves the lease agreements that are necessary for the financing, and also a pledge of general revenues for the city to pay for the lease rental payments. Assuming you all would adopt this resolution this evening, we would then have a legal notice to be advertised, which would trigger a 30-day period. Once we're through that 30-day period, we can kind of get into earnest in terms of getting a rating on the bonds and marketing them. Our timetable currently contemplates a closing on these bonds in early May, subject to sort of completion of the steps that we need to get through in the rating process. So that's what we're working towards. And I should mention Oscar Gutierrez is behind me as well with Bondry. So to the extent you all have questions about particular financing terms, interest rates, payments, and things like that, Oscar might be best to answer those. I do want to touch a little bit on why we're using the Redevelopment Authority for this financing. Historically, a lot of communities would use a building corporation type structure for city hall projects. The schools do that for their school buildings. Cities and towns and counties have the option to also, instead of doing a building corporation, which is a nonprofit corporation, is to use a redevelopment authority. And one of the advantages, well, several advantages to using a redevelopment authority over a building corporation is we don't have to form a nonprofit corporation. You already have a redevelopment authority. We don't have to get a taxpayer petition signed by 50 or more taxpayers, which is a requirement for a building corporation financing. We can do a 25-year term on this financing. That's probably the most important thing on this one. It helps the city with its cash flow and meeting some of its goals. If we go with a building corporation, we're going to be at a 20-year term with this financing structure. And one of the other reasons that we like to do this, and you'll see up here, we have 2 lease agreements that are being approved. One of the lease agreements is kind of the actual, we like to call it the financing lease. That's the lease between the Redevelopment Authority and the Redevelopment Commission that provides for the mechanism to make the payments on the bonds. There's another lease here, which we'll call it a site lease. And you may have seen this before with some other financings that have come before you. That is leasing the ground for the fire station and the police station to the Redevelopment Authority. But it's also leasing road assets that are in the city's inventory to the Redevelopment Authority. And it's very important now with the rating agencies, when we go before them with these types of financings, is they want to make sure there's no risk of the construction not being completed. They want a leasable asset so the city can make the payments. And I know I'm rambling a bit here, and I'll wind up, but when we do lease financings under law, the city can't make a lease payment until the asset is usable. During the construction period, those roads are usable assets, and so we put them under the lease. Once the fire station and building and the police station are completed, those will become the remaining assets under the remaining lease term. We'll release those roads back to the city's inventory. They can be used for other financings. And I want to be clear, this doesn't involve any interruption of the use of those assets. They're simply there as sort of security under the lease, but they will continue to be used. Easy to do with the redevelopment authority. With the building corporation, you have to transfer fee simple property to the building corporation and get appraisals, which makes it almost impossible to do with the roads. We can look to other city assets to do that, but in this case, we thought it was most efficient to do the redevelopment authority structure. And one final tag on this, and I'll stop for questions, is, one final thing I'll tag on this is, we've always taken the view that public safety projects are an eligible activity for redevelopment commissions and redevelopment authorities. Certainly they're important for economic development and redevelopment activities, but recently the legislature has amended the statutes to make it very clear that redevelopment commissions can be funding public safety, not only capital projects, but working capital items. So with that, I'll stop and try to answer any questions, and as I mentioned, Oster's here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Otten. Any questions this evening?
You mentioned this is for the police station and the fire station. I think you said fire station 85. Is it for 85? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for a real good explanation. It's probably the simplest explanation I've had a lawyer explain on the road piece, and I've listened to a lot of them, so congrats. There is a small Scribner's error here on the document. It says resolution number 25-107. I believe it's 106. I think we can just make that modification on the fly. Sorry. I'm in reading legislation mode right now, so just if we can make that quick edit, I think we'll be fine.
If I would just add to Kurt's question, the reason we're rolling it under one bond is just issuance costs. This is a more cost-effective way, more efficient way of bonding for these projects.
And then it's the other piece. It looks like the public hearing component requirement was all done at the RDC then. I see a chairman nodding behind you as well, but just wanted to verify that publicly as well.
Yes, yeah, we did hold that hearing. They were advertised. We have the proofs of publication in both the Redevelopment Commission and the Redevelopment Authority. Actually, were met at about the same time and adopted their resolutions.
Great, thank you.
I got a question. So once like the life of the buildings or the police station moves somewhere else and they're vacated and possibly sold for some other use in the future, where would that funding, that money from the sale of the buildings go? Would it go into RDC then? Or would it go into general funds? Or how's that?
And maybe I need a little background here, Councilman. Are you talking about existing fire stations that will be, that will
Well,
not
for
be
instance,
used?
like our fire station 81 on 32, we don't know what we're going to do with. But I'm saying if that happens in 25, 30 years, how, like what's the funding mechanism? RDC owns it at this point, and then it basically goes into the RDC funds, or I just curious.
Typically, with this type of asset, it would go back to the city. We leave it open in the documents. When the bonds are paid off or defeased, then the asset will be transferred either to the Redevelopment Commission or another city agency.
Who makes that choice, I guess?
Probably the administration would make that type of decision on what made the most sense.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion this evening? This is, again, just a reminder, this is a resolution, so it's eligible for adoption this evening. We need a motion and a second.
Motion to approve Resolution 25-106.
Motion made by Councilor McCarty, seconded by Councilor Waniger. Seeing no other discussion, may we call the roll?
John Dart,
Yes.
Victor McCarty,
Yes.
Joe Deppner,
Yes.
Noah Herring,
Yes.
Kurt Waniger,
Yes.
Patrick Tam.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Our next order of business is Resolution 25-107, which is the Common Council of the City of Westfield, Indiana, approving the rules of procedure for the Historic Preservation Commission. I believe we have Director Nail this evening.
Yeah, thank you. For the record, John Nail, Director of Public Works, City of Westfield. So I'm presenting this resolution, but it was also pointed out to me it was a good opportunity to provide a little bit of background information to the council to kind of give a brief history of why we have a Westfield Historic Preservation in the first place before you guys discuss this resolution. So the Westfield Historic Preservation Commission was created when Ordinance 22-09 was passed, which was back in July of 2022 with previous council. That ordinance was passed to create the Preservation Commission. And the purpose of that Preservation Commission is for the protection of historic properties in Westfield. I've got a snippet there that I'm not going to read through. It's directly from Ordinance 22-09. Once that commission was created, the mayor appoints members to the commission. Mayor Cook at the time appointed 5 members, but the council did not approve those appointees. And so the Preservation Commission essentially was created but sat vacant until this new council came in. Mayor Willis appointed 5 new members, and you all approved those appointees. And so the reason for the Ordinance 22-09, we're talking about State Road 32, is a reminder of our downtown reconstruction project. That project impacted the existing Westfield Historic District. It is a district that is on the National Register, and the boundaries are highlighted on the slide above. Our project impacted several buildings on the south side of 32, and because state funding was involved in the State Road 32 project, we worked with stakeholders to come up with mitigation items to help mitigate the impacts to that historic district that were caused by that transportation project. One of the 9 mitigation items that we agreed to with our stakeholders was to create this Historic Preservation Commission. And the reason that the stakeholders wanted a local preservation commission is that actually local preservation commissions are have the ability to protect properties. Just because you own a building that is on the National Register of Historic Places, that National Registry does not afford really any protections to that building. So if you're an owner of a National Register building, you can demo that building if you would like to. There's nothing the National Register is going to do to stop you from doing that. However, at a local level, local preservation commissions do have the authority to prevent demolition or to preserve and mitigate those dealings. So that was a big item in the mitigation process, was to create this local preservation commission for protection of some of our remaining historic buildings. So the appointed members, Jake Plummer, Kurt Weitzel, Gina Terrell, Melody Jones, and Stephanie Carlson. We did have an education session with these members to basically for me to provide them this update to make sure they understood why they were here, what the intent of this commission was, and to also importantly decide on when we're going to meet and what's convenient for their schedules. So we had an education session on February 12th. From that, we agreed to meet on the second Wednesday of each month at 5 p.m. here in Westfield City Hall. So it'll be a monthly meeting. It'll be a public meeting. And some of those agreements are the basis for this resolution 25-107. And then next steps, the commission, per the ordinances, to identify historic buildings, structures, sites, and districts located within the city. So they will be doing a survey to look at where their purview really lies within the city, what makes sense. And importantly, the city council has final approval of any submitted maps of historic districts that they will submit to the council for approval. So you will see any maps that are provided outlining their suggested boundaries with which they'll operate. And then additionally, you'll likely see some revised rules of procedure. You'll notice that in this resolution, it's pretty bare bones. These are just kind of the minimal rules that we talked about in the education session. And as this commission gets their feet under them and gets off the ground, you'll likely see some revised rules with some more detail in there that'll, again, come before you for approval of these rules and procedures. With that, happy to answer any questions. Try to keep it brief. With respect to the resolution, like I said, the key item here is it'll be a monthly public meeting, second Wednesday of every month here in City Hall at 5 p.m. There's some other rules in there that you can read through. mainly the public's welcome to speak at those meetings. It'll operate very similar to other meetings that we see in the city, much like city council, with the orders of conduct and so forth. So with that, happy to answer any questions. I know I ran through it fairly quickly.
Thank you. Any questions this evening?
So,
Councilor?
I guess Westfield, downtown Westfield, to me, doesn't seem like it has a ton of historical buildings there currently. And you said there's a possibility of creating a district map around certain areas that then any building within there would be protected locally and would not be able to do anything to those buildings without permission from this committee?
Sort of. So there's already exists a historic district that's recognized on the National Registry. If this commission were to adopt those boundaries, which I think would be fairly prudent, it's gone through a fairly high level of review already, but it's up to this commission to adopt certain maps. If those maps were adopted and again approved by City Council, that commission would have review of activities in that district. So for example, if an owner wanted to demo a building that it was of historic value, that commission would review, either approve or deny that demolition. They'd work through any mitigation items potentially proposed for that demolition. And I'm not going to go through the entire 22-09 ordinance. Happy to sit down with you if you'd like to kind of walk through it. But there are very specific items that are outlined in that ordinance that are based on state statute as well.
Hey, John, also, because I know we had a lot of conversation about this with council, because I was on council when this got approved. You have to opt into this program, right? This isn't mandatory. You buy a home that's historical and you're bound to these rules. You as a homeowner have to opt in. We were very careful to make sure we carved out rules that did not take away homeowners' rights.
Yeah, and again, within 22-09, there's some phasing strategies that can be implemented for the actual adoption of the boundaries themselves, which would allow even owners of properties within an existing National Registry district to opt out if they wanted to as well. So there's a lot of options for owners that don't want to be a part of it to opt in or opt out. And again, it's all subject to review of City Council. Review and approval, I should say, City Council.
So I'm confused on what authority would this commission have if the homeowner could just opt out of it?
Well, without going through all the details of Ordinance 22-09, what I'll say is again, based on state statute, there are specific processes in place to opt out if they'd like to. And again, ultimately, it's up to the commission, even if they are within that district, if a homeowner provides reasonable economic reasons why a demolition makes sense, there are rules even within that ordinance that demolition could be permitted. But there is a level of you have to provide some pretty good reason why you're going to be demoing a very nice historic building, I would say. But there are processes in place for that to happen.
John, I think you mentioned, maybe you mentioned this before, but there's a preservation commission, and then is there a historical? There are two organizations in the city, and how do they work together, or how do they collaborate, or do they?
We do have a historic society, and then we have the Westfield Preservation Alliance. Both of them were stakeholders we worked with during the 32 process. We also got a lot of guidance from Indiana Landmarks, which is the statewide preservation organization in Indiana. I would say the Historical Society operates separately from the Preservation Alliance, but they do have a lot of common goals and overlapping goals in that they want to be sure to tell the story of Westfield's history and also to provide preservation for really outstanding historic buildings that we do have in the Westfield area. But you're right that they do operate somewhat independently of each other.
And the Preservation Society is more looking at building preservation. Historical Society is more focused on the history of our city and making sure that's communicated. They run the Barker family cabin. They have an office here up on the second floor. And if you go in there, they have a lot of historical pieces to our city. So,
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions this evening? Seeing none, we need a motion and a second.
Motion to approve Resolution 25-107.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion made by Counselor Dart, seconded by Counselor McCarty. Seeing no other conversation, may we call the roll?
John Dart,
Yes.
Joe Deppner,
Yes.
Noah Herron,
Yes.
Victor McCarty,
Yes.
Patrick Tam,
Yes.
Kurt Warniger.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Next this evening, we have city council comments. Counselor McCarty?
Yeah, real brief
APC.
update from APC last week. We only had 2 items, and they were on our consent agenda. It was a Family Express, a fuel station / market at the southwest corner of 146 and Ditch Road, and then also the Westfield Operations Center receiving final approval, which it will be the transformation of the current transportation facility next to Maple Glen there on Ditch Road. That's it.
Great. And then Counselor Waniger?
Yeah, this afternoon we held our Finance Committee meeting. We discussed the 2023 ACFR that was completed and going through the final review process with the State Board of Accounts. We discussed the 2024 ACFR that will be signed here shortly to move forward with that process as soon as the 23 ACFR is completed, or 24 ACFR is completed, I'm sorry. And so then the 25 will then start, and then also discuss contracts regarding the basically the city performing their assessment of their State Board of Accounts for their fiscal year. And then we went over the finance of the city in regards to the fund reports and other items associated with that. We also had a portion of the Finance Committee meeting where we discussed the transition of Grand Park and how that is going, and how making sure all the proper funds are set up to basically transfer funds back and forth between the city and Grand Park Sports and Entertainment. So that was about it. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you're good.
Okay.
Any other comments? Mayor?
yeah, real quick, this isn't news for council, but to those in the audience, the listening tour for golf carts has concluded. I think we had about 200 people show up over 4 events. We had additional ways for people to weigh in through a QR code. We got another 20 or 30, maybe a little bit more comments. So we will have a meeting, I believe it's tomorrow. A few of the council members will be there, and we're going to start digesting that, and we'll see where we go from here. But I do appreciate all those who participated and weighed in, and whether we move forward with an ordinance or not, I do feel confident that the council went through a very thorough process to listen to residents, and if we do come back with an ordinance, there will be a lot of vetting and a lot of attention to those pros and cons that we heard. So we appreciate all those that weighed in. And with that, I will turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you.